Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in the JCC countries, is a country where most Ugandans are. Currently, we now have 140,000 Ugandans working in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. These statistics were given to us by the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because they have an online system that is able to track and show all those who have work visas and working in that country. Raise issues for our attention to address. So those were key representatives, but a number of them were able to tell us a lot. We also met workers who are now in distress situations, those who were now away from their workplace, but now in shelter, distressed, and destined to come back home. Through the Ugandan embassy, there is a shelter in Riyadh. We met girls there, those who had either run away from their workplace or had been rescued. We met them, we engaged with them, but also there is a shelter in one of the government place, a private company called Sakan, that is contracted by the government of Saudi Arabia, and they also rescue girls and put in their accommodation shelter and process for them documents to return. We also met girls there, and in that circumstance, by that time we found about 40 girls that are Ugandan girls in that shelter, and the day we returned with some of them in the same plane. And in all our meetings, we were looking at the rights of workers as enshrined in the agreements that we had signed in 2017. Actually, at one point, the embassy was telling us about 2,000 passports have been reported lost. So, but those ones are because they travel here, they go, and their passports are confiscated. By the time you want to return back to Uganda, maybe you've fallen out with your employer, you cannot go back and get your passport, you go to try to get your passport, they tell you you must continue to work. And so those are the difficulties some of our Ugandans are having. There are also instances of torture and mistreatment of domestic workers. We have found, of course, in the shelter, people telling us stories that are very painful, and cases of denial of proper meals to domestic workers has also been something that was common. Employers falsely branding migrant workers as runaway cases or as theft cases in an attempt to escape responsibility for paying salary, for providing return ticket, and for other obligations. This has also been a very common complaint, that what people do, because in the contract I earlier stated, our condition is the recruitment company must pay ticket for the person returning back. So what employers do, when your contract is about to end in 2 years, maybe you are left with 3 months or 2 months, because they do not want to buy a ticket, they go and report to police that my housemaid has run away, when they are the ones that drive them and leave them on the street. Because they know under the law in that country, if somebody is reported as a runaway, the employer will not have responsibility. So these cases, we found many people who are in that category, that they are unable now to get exit visa, because if you are reported runaway, then the person who is your employer can also is not obligated to give you exit visa. That is when now you have to go to the embassy and start processing documents afresh. And this is the area where most Ugandans, you hear parents are saying, we even have money for ticket, but we cannot bring back our person. Why? It is those situations. that in that country the legal framework is the person who is your employer is the one to give you what they call exit visa. If they don't give you exit visa, you cannot exit. So in the circumstance now, the only recourse is the embassy that will now start investigating, going to the authority, reporting, and giving you a new passport and negotiating with the government so that you are allowed to exit. And for you to be allowed to exit, there must be a lot of negotiation and the employer accepting now to disengage you so that you are given exit by the embassy of Uganda. So that takes long. There are people who will take even 3 months. Some people have to go through court for them to be allowed to exit. In the next 3 months, we are able to receive, as ministers, we will be able to receive outcome from the technical meeting. So most of the issues that were raised during our meetings in respect of either lack of enforcement of responsibility or rights of workers, we agreed within the next 2 months, the technical committee should look at them, meet, and come up with proposals. And at worst, in 3 months, the ministers will be able to meet again to receive from the technical committee the way forward. We also, during the meeting, realized that there is need to stem irregular and increasing cases of transfer of domestic workers' services from one sponsor to another. The scenario that is envisaged in the agreement we signed is that a worker who leaves Uganda is given a 2 years contract, and after 2 years, the company in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is supposed to facilitate the worker with an exit visa and a ticket to come back home. If that worker wants to go back, then they can go back. Then too, they are supposed to place them on a contract in a home or a workplace which is known, and that person where they have placed the worker is not allowed to transfer the worker to another home or another workplace without consent or permission from the company. But what we found is most workers are complaining that they go to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the employer place them maybe to a home, they reach that home, then the owner of the home again decides to move them maybe to an auntie or to a village outside, very far from Riyadh, because the country is very big. So that case of transferring workers without permission has rendered so many workers sometimes in difficulties where they want to return home. They have gone to a second home without the consent of the company that sent them, and they cannot get exit visa and a ticket to come back. So we found circumstances where somebody has been there 6 years, 4 years, 3 years, they want to come back home, but because of being transferred and having no exit visa, it becomes very difficult for them to come, and they do not have mechanism of how to reach to the boss or to the recruitment company to bring them home. So in that circumstance, we now, the technical committee which we are establishing is supposed to make sure that these irregularities is rectified, and a mechanism to rectify it within 3 months. We will be able to come back to the country and brief you on the strategy of rectifying. But the principle of stopping it was agreed between our delegation and the delegation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the recruitment companies in Saudi Arabia that we met with. We also got complaints related to breach of terms and conditions in migrant workers' contracts, because when they live here, they sign a contract, and the contract stipulates so many things. You're going to be paid this amount. You will be entitled to accommodation. The company will give you accommodation. The company will give you medical care, and so on. It's in the contract. But when we reached there, we found circumstances where there are so many complaints in respect to non-enforcement of sanctions, and some of them include, for example, denial of access to medical services by employers. Most of them complain that while they sign an agreement here in Uganda, that the employer will give them medical insurance and take care of their medical aspect when they are sick. They are not being catered for. Incomplete or non-payment of wages. This actually is the #1 complaint. People sign here that you're going to be paid 900 real or 1,000 or 1,200 real. You reach there, you are made to sign another agreement, and that new agreement will now reduce your pay. And in some circumstances, you are told immediately you go, you will be deployed. They reach there, 3 months, they are still in accommodation, they are not being deployed. They end up asking money from home to again look after themselves as they wait for the job. At the moment, the ministry has already started engaging in follow-up activities and strengthening the role of the embassies and all other aspects, including engagement with the Ministry of Finance, because some of this will require financial support. Already Cabinet had agreed and endorsed that we have additional staff in form of labor touches, and therefore we are going also to ensure that these labor touches can be able to be deployed. And we will continue also to ensure that cases that are reported on abuse and non-compliance of contractual obligation, that we put strict sanctions for the companies and individuals involved in violation of the rights. And this will not only be companies in Uganda, even companies in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia who employ Ugandan. We have agreed that if any of them abuses the contractual rights and obligations without reasonable cause, we will suspend them, because we are the one who still vet them and license them to work with Ugandan companies through our Ugandan embassy. So we have made it very clear to them, and for those that have issues, there are those that we already found having issues. We have already given notice to them to rectify those issues within the next 2 weeks. If they don't rectify, I will write to the ambassador to suspend them. The ambassador already knows the companies. I will not talk about the names of the companies, but there are companies, about 2 in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that we have already earmarked to suspend if within 2 weeks they don't rectify the problems that we have already told the ambassador to communicate to them.